They watched as the skyline turned black with approaching vessels. An immense armada, numbering in the thousands, advanced across the sea. What followed stunned everyone present in the room. One admiral murmured something about their gravest error, his face draining of color. But another general cut him off. He had different information news that arrived at the worst possible moment. A message from the Emperor. Just then, someone spotted a second wave, even larger than the first, its scale 3 times greater. One officer spoke 5 words that silenced all discussion. What they said next would be analyzed and remembered for generations, proving beyond doubt that they fully understood what was about to unfold. That was the instant of clarity. June 6th, 1944. The room fell into absolute stillness. Japanese military commanders stood motionless, transfixed by the reports streaming in from Europe. The Americans had achieved something previously thought unattainable. Along the coast of France, a vast fleet had materialized more ships than anyone believed possible. Admiral Yamamoto's most dire forecast was becoming reality, but he was no longer there to witness it. The officers in Tokyo carried a secret knowledge, one that the rest of the world did not yet grasp. Years earlier, they had conducted a careful assessment, a calculation of American industrial and military strength. Now, one general reached for a cigarette, his fingers trembling. His colleagues noticed. They all knew what this development meant for Japan. Yet what they discussed behind those closed doors would remain classified for decades. The words were too perilous to be shared, for they exposed their deepest dread, a fear that was now unfolding before their eyes. The prophecy. 3 years prior, Admiral Yamamoto had delivered a chilling assessment. He had cautioned the Japanese government against provoking the United States. His warning was clear and precise. I can dominate the Pacific for 6 months, perhaps a year. Then came the part that carried the most weight. After that, I have no confidence in victory. The leadership dismissed him, believing he was being overly cautious. Pearl Harbor occurred regardless. Now, as they observed the D-Day landings, those same leaders were forced to confront the truth. Every word Yamamoto had spoken was coming to pass. The Americans had landed 150,000 soldiers in a single day. Japan's remaining naval force amounted to perhaps 50 ships. One officer retrieved Yamamoto's original report. The pages were worn from repeated study. He pointed to a single line, one that described their current predicament with unsettling accuracy, word for word. But there was another document, even more troubling, the industrial revelation. General Tojo stood by the window, holding a sheet of paper. It contained intelligence gathered from the United States. The figures were incomprehensible. America was constructing an aircraft carrier every month. Japan required years to complete one. In a single week, American factories produced more aircraft than Japan managed in several months. Their industries operated continuously 3 shifts, day and night, without pause. But the most staggering figure was the number of ships involved in the D-Day operation. Over 5,000 vessels crossing the English Channel. Japan's entire surviving fleet could barely match 1% of that. Tojo finally broke the silence. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "We have awakened a sleeping giant." The room remained quiet. All present knew those words, whether Yamamoto had actually spoken them after Pearl Harbor or not, had become a metaphor that was now a reality. And there was more in that intelligence report. Something about what lay ahead. The Emperor's inquiry. Emperor Hirohito summoned a meeting. This was highly unusual. The Emperor typically avoided direct involvement in military affairs. The top commanders arrived at the palace, bringing maps, reports, and grim assessments. They brought no hopeful news. Hirohito posed a single, simple question. If America can launch an invasion of Europe with such overwhelming force, what kind of strength will they bring to Japan? No one answered immediately. At first, the calculations were overwhelming. Japan was closer to American military bases than France had been. The United States could deploy an even greater force in the Pacific. One admiral finally spoke. "Your Majesty, they may not need to invade us at all." The Emperor leaned forward, intrigued. This was not what he expected. "Explain," he said. The admiral's explanation would lay bare Japan's true strategic catastrophe, the nightmare that haunted their nights. But before he could continue, an aide rushed in with urgent news from the Pacific. The aide's hands shook as he delivered the message. He held a decoded cable from Japanese forces in the Philippines. The Americans were coming back. 5 words. That was all. General Yamashita read it twice. He understood its significance. General MacArthur had kept his vow. He had declared he would return to the Philippines, and now he was fulfilling it. But this was not merely about the Philippines. If the Americans reclaimed those islands, they would be within range of Japan for sustained bombing campaigns close enough for daily strikes. The High Command studied their maps again. The truth was undeniable. Germany was collapsing in the west. That meant the full weight of American military and industrial power would now be directed solely at Japan, no longer divided between 2 fronts, no longer sharing resources, just the entire might of the United States focused on one objective. One officer shut his eyes. "We cannot win this." At last, someone voiced what they had all been thinking. But speaking it aloud carried consequences. It meant something else had to follow private discussions, quiet deliberation. Late that night, a select group gathered. Only the highest-ranking commanders, no aides, no written records. They discussed matters that had once been unthinkable. Possible peace proposals, terms to end the conflict, and ways to bring the war to a close. But there was a monumental obstacle. The nation's long-standing military traditions did not permit surrender. To many, accepting defeat was considered more unbearable than death itself, and the opposing side demanded a complete and unconditional end to hostilities, something that could place the emperor's position at risk. Japan could not accept that. Thus, they were caught in a trap. They could not win the war. They could not end it. All they could do was postpone the unavoidable. One general proposed a desperate alternative. "We make any invasion so costly in blood and resources that the other side agrees to a negotiated peace." The others nodded slowly. It was the only path left. But none of them knew what was being developed in the desert of New Mexico, a new kind of weapon that would render all their strategies obsolete. The final understanding came in the summer of 1945. The situation was beyond hope. Germany had surrendered in May. Japan now stood alone against America, Britain, and the Soviet Union. The High Command convened once more. The same room, the same maps, but a drastically different reality. American bombers attacked Japanese cities night after night. Firebombing raids obliterated entire districts. Tokyo burned. Osaka burned. No place was safe anymore. The military leaders still advocated resistance. They prepared for Operation Downfall, the planned American invasion of the Japanese home islands. They estimated it would result in the deaths of millions, both Japanese and American. But they believed it would preserve Japan's honor, or so they told themselves. Then, on August 6th, everything changed. One bomb, one city. Hiroshima vanished in a single flash of light. 3 days later, Nagasaki suffered the same fate. The High Command finally grasped the truth. There was no honor in national annihilation. What they said in their final meeting would decide whether Japan would survive as a nation. The words that ended it. August 14th, 1945, the last meeting. Emperor Hirohito made the decision himself. The military leaders were deadlocked. Half favored surrender. Half insisted on fighting to the last person. No consensus could be reached. Hirohito spoke in the formal language of the imperial court. The war situation has not developed to Japan's advantage. It was the most understated declaration in history. Japan had lost everything, but the emperor's phrasing allowed all sides to preserve dignity. Then came the crucial statement. "We must endure the unendurable." Those words brought the war in the Pacific to a close. The military leaders who had witnessed the D-Day landings 3 years earlier had been correct. Yamamoto had been correct. The industrial capacity of the United States was unstoppable. The words they had exchanged in that first meeting had proven true every forecast, every anxiety, every calculation. From the moment they saw those ships off the coast of Normandy, they knew Japan's war was already lost.